Hello, everyone. Jamin Shively here with my partner, Marco. Marco, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Jamin. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. All right.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay. So we're doing kind of a recording to discuss some concepts that we're going to be delving into tomorrow at the Block Party 129. And the basic idea, I'm going to approach this from a particular sort of angle where I'm going to describe two different modalities in which people participate, the two kind of dominant modalities that people participate in solving the world's biggest problems, right? The most urgent problems facing humanity. We'll briefly go over a list of what I call the big six of those problems, and then we'll talk about the two most common modalities of how people participate in working on those problems. And then I'm going to make the argument that both of those primary modalities sit at one end of a spectrum, right? And the other end of the spectrum is essentially absent. And then we're going to talk about, well, what would it look like if we populated the other end of the spectrum so that we've got both ends of the spectrum operating. And I know that all sounds pretty vague, like what the heck is this guy talking about? But let's just jump in and we'll see what we're talking about. So I'll be screen sharing for much of today, and Marco, as always, just jump in with any comments, any thoughts. So first of all, what I'm calling the big six world problems, most urgent problems facing humanity? We have pandemics. Been living with that one for a while, going on 3 years now. We have the threat of nuclear war. We have global warming. We have the destruction of the biosphere. These are all interrelated, of course. We have food and water shortages. And then we have, I'm just going to call it collapse, and that includes economic, political, etc., right? These are what I call the big six, and two things stand out. Any one of these big six could take us out as humanity. The combination of all six of them, it's like playing Russian roulette with a revolver that has 6 chambers, and there's a bullet in every chamber, and you're committed to playing 6 times, right? I mean, it's undescribably bad. The second point I want to make about the big six is roll back the clock 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. How many mega problems of the magnitude of any one of the big six did we have even 5 years ago? Did we have? Well, of course, the seeds were sown for these, but they weren't in our face, ready to explode or exploding as we speak. The pandemic has been exploding for almost 3 years now. Nuclear war, we're right at the verge. Global warming is in high gear. Destruction of the biosphere. Again, global warming and destruction of the biosphere, both of these existed, 5 years, 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, 50 years ago, but they've just been on an exponential, but now they're just going crazy. Food and water shortages are a thing of now. They weren't here 5 years ago, anywhere near the degree that they're here now. And then collapse wasn't even on people's minds 5 years ago. So whereas 5 years ago, the number of mega problems that was in our face that everyone recognized was 0. and now we're up to 6 and probably counting. So things are really, 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 really bad. All right. So how are we dealing with the big 6? And here's where I wanted to remember, I was talking about like there's 2 ends of a spectrum, one end of the spectrum here, another end of the spectrum here, and we can be anywhere in between. So the one end of the spectrum that I want to talk about first is, I'm just going to call it the hierarchical. So again, back to the fundamental question, how are we as humanity, dealing with the big 6? So the 2 dominant modalities in which we grapple with the big 6 as individuals are both on the hierarchical end of the spectrum. One is representative government, right? And the governments that deal with the big 6, that kind of, take responsibility for them, are the national governments and the assemblages of national governments. Think the United Nations, NATO, et cetera. And other, alliances that are forming, the BRICS and whatnot. And how do we participate as individuals? Well, we can go out and vote every 4 years, or every couple of years or whatever. So it's just a very weak lever. And so we've basically abdicated to these national governments and assemblages thereof. And, we vote for who we think, will, anyway, you know how the game goes. Okay, so that's one modality that's within the hierarchical class, if you will. The other major modality in which we humans participate is through nonprofits. We join Greenpeace, we join the Sierra Club, we join whatever, ACLU, and we donate money, and we vote on certain issues, and we vote for, who's going to be president or on the board or whatever. And it's kind of same old in terms of hierarchical, right? We contribute in terms of ideas and discussion, relatively little. On average, there are exceptions. There are people. There are people who volunteer full time for nonprofits and get very involved. But as a whole, they're hierarchical. Now, in both cases, what do you got? You got a number of big governments, and then national governments, and then a bunch of medium-sized governments, and then a larger number of small governments, and they're all the governments are playing, but national governments are notoriously corrupt, and also notoriously, I'll just say, non-innovative when it comes to solutions. They're basically keeping the trains running and making sure the rich get richer, etc. And then the rich keep them in power in exchange for them helping the rich get richer. So it's the national governments are just a disaster when it comes to addressing the big 6. What about nonprofits? When we used to have the Sierra Club dinners that I would chair in California, we shut those down with the pandemic, and haven't restarted them. But at this one Sierra Club dinner, there was a professor of sociology, and he made the point that there are over 1 million nonprofit organizations, registered nonprofit organizations in the world, over 1 million, with combined membership of over 1 billion people. And he said, consider that if all those nonprofits, if you consider them as a group, as a set, put them all together in one big bundle, they constitute a superpower in terms of combined membership of over 1 billion, in terms of resources and connections and this and that. But they constitute the most dysfunctional superpower, mainly because they're competing with each other for resources, for key personnel, for celebrity endorsements, for political connections, you name it. But they're competing with each other. They kind of see each other in that sense as enemies, and they're not really coordinating together that well, and they're hierarchical. So with the superpower lens, they look very, and they are very hierarchical, and they don't look that terribly different from national governments, again, through the hierarchical lens. And as I've made the point, individuals, have a relatively weak lever, write a check once a quarter, once a year or something, and maybe fill out a ballot, and send it in for voting on XYZ. So I'm going to screen share again. So what I've talked about both with national governments and with nonprofits, both of those modalities are participating in addressing the big six and anything else that might come along. They're both here at the hierarchical end of the spectrum, right? You have national governments and nonprofits. Okay. The other end of the spectrum is a bit absent, and that would be what would be the opposite, right? Let's just go straight to the opposite. Well, it'd be something that is, instead of being hierarchical, what we could do is we could think of it as well, I'll just cut to the chase. Imagine something decentralized, right? Non-hierarchical, and and therefore very participatory in a very egalitarian way. And so let's now, with this framing of the big six and these two ends of the spectrum, and the fact that this end of the spectrum is kind of noticeably absent, but just consider how empowering it would be for an individual to participate in something that's non-hierarchical, where everyone is basically equal in terms of their inherent influence, highly participatory, everyone can participate, and is decentralized. The decentralized kind of goes hand in hand with the non-hierarchical. Well, at this point, and this is what I really want to delve into next. I want to say, well, what might this look like? And, where are we going with this? And what's the big deal, et cetera, et cetera. But first, let me pause and see if there are any questions or comments. And from either Alan or Marco.
No, it's all flowing well and logical and well on point.
Awesome. Thank you, Marco. So, and just jump in with any questions or comments, either you guys, as we move along. So now I'm just going to cut straight to the chase and first describe what one of these things might look like, this kind of form. And this is just one specific form. There could be multiple different forms, but if just by talking about one, it'll clarify better what we're talking about here and also give a concrete example. So Melissa and I are working on a letter to the mayor of the town where we live, which is Langley, Washington, as you can see here on this hoodie, or maybe you can't, but anyway, Langley, Washington. And it's a town of about 1,000 people in the town and 5,000 in the township. We live in kind of a rural area on Whidbey Island. And so we're kind of developing a concept called the other Langley. And the idea is that every Saturday, anyone who wishes from the town, the township, or even the surrounding area can join us in, or can get together and have a weekly conversation about precisely the big six and any other issues that they care to discuss, the group cares to discuss. I mean, the ideal is that the whole town shows up, right, once a week, say on a Saturday morning, and we get together and we talk about these things. And we talk about them in kind of one of two ways. One is what I would call just kind of the general assembly kind of way, basically everyone participating in one big meeting at which, people might give updates. They might give, 2 to 5 minute, speeches on a given topic or presentations or whatever. We might talk about, what we want to prioritize as a community, et cetera. And then the second modality is very analogous to Zoom, breakout rooms, except these would be in person, right? All these meetings would by default be in person, but some communities may want to do them online or whatever. But the town of Langley is small enough and compact enough that we can easily do it in person. So general assembly and breakout rooms. And then, just for simplicity, imagine that the breakout rooms span, let's just, for simplicity and also consistency with what we've been talking about, let's say that there are 6 breakout rooms, one for each of, the big 6 problems that we've been talking about. I mean, these are our existential problems, so, why not? So now, at first glance, you might say, well, so what? So the people, 100 people or 50 people or whatever number get together in the town of Langley and they divvy up into 6 breakout rooms and they talk about the big 6. Whoop-de-doo, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal comes when there are lots of Langleys, lots of towns participating, right? And each having conversations on each of the big 6. And then imagine that on perhaps a different day of the week, multiple different towns and cities around the world get together and have, I'll just call them larger meetings where, on each of the big 6. And these larger meetings would include people from lots of different towns and cities. And again, each of these meetings different from the weekly meeting in a town like Langley in person, where we talk about all the big 6, in general, and as well as some local issues, as well as some regional, maybe countywide, maybe statewide, maybe national, whatever. But again, I'm putting some emphasis on the big 6 because, for obvious reasons, they're existential. We've got to solve each and every one of them. And so in a way, this is kind of like an all hands on deck, but different from the hierarchical approaches of national governments and nonprofits. This is completely decentralized. Now, in terms of how do you achieve that, we'll talk about that at the block party tomorrow. But in a nutshell, given how, given technology, communication technology, information technology, et cetera, it's imminently, we have all the ingredients, all the pieces that we need. We just need to put them together in a way that we can empower people in towns and cities across the world to come together and have specific meetings on each of the big 6. So that's kind of the big idea. Now, in terms of these characteristics that I was talking about this kind of right-hand end of the spectrum, right, as we see here, decentralized, non-hierarchical, and participatory. These characteristics hold both for the kind of town meetings, the weekly town meetings on each of the on all problems that want to be discussed, as well as in the focused Zoom meetings that are international, that are planetary, and that include people from as many towns and cities around the world who wish to participate. So broad brushstrokes, let's just say there's on the order of 1 million towns and cities in the world. That would imply an average population of 8,000. Obviously, you have some big mega cities and a lot of large cities, which have probably combined on the order of half. Well, the big cities, I don't know. Well, assuming a good chunk of the. Well, I don't want to go. Everything from a tiny town of 50 people all the way to a mega city with 20 million people. The mega city with 20 million people might divide themselves up into neighborhood communities, or by zip code or by whatever, and basically divide themselves up into effectively a bunch of towns. Doesn't matter, but we're talking about on the order of 1 million, right, towns and cities and divisions thereof who could participate. And the cool thing is we would then have an abundance of people who would want to participate in these kind of planetary Zoom meetings on each of the big six. And to the extent that we have too many people showing up, that's a great problem, because each of the big six can be further divided into their parts, right? So the last one, collapse, you've got economic collapse of culture and society, political collapse, infrastructure collapse, energy collapse, whatever, boom, boom, boom. So these different aspects or parts of collapse can each be held in yet different, separate, more focused meetings. And that's still at the level of problem. For each of those, there are solutions, different solutions. And then if you consider all these different solutions as a set, there might be different syntheses of solutions, or kind of combinations of solutions that can be packaged together in a single program or movement or strategy or what have you. So the more the merrier, and let's empower humanity to basically get together and do one giant push over at this end of the spectrum, which we believe has the potential to be vastly more effective than the dysfunctional superpowers of national governments and nonprofits, right? So these are going to continue doing their thing. God help them. They certainly haven't delivered much in terms of solving the big six. The proof's in the pudding. Each of those are getting worse, right? So for all of the best efforts of the national governments and nonprofits of the world, we're taking home a failing report card. It's like we're taking imagine you're taking 6 classes at school, one on each of the big six, and you come home, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, Jamie, hey, how's your report card? Well, I got 6 Fs, 6 failing grades. Great, let's take you out to vegan ice cream and a movie to celebrate. The national governments of the world and the nonprofits combined are bringing home a fail across each and every one of the big six. So let us try this other way, not to replace national governments or nonprofits. They'll continue. I'm sure they'll continue. But let's try a modality in which people can actually participate. We're the 8 billion humans on the planet constitute a sleeping giant when it comes to solving the big six. We've basically abdicated to a handful of national governments and the billionaires that own and control them, right? And a handful of nonprofits and the, power hungry people who get to the top of those hierarchies. It's not working. It's literally a grade of F relative to each of those. So let's try this other way that basically cracks open the potential of the 8 billion people, the vast majority of whom are basically sitting on the sidelines and, doing their small part, as I mentioned at the beginning, either voting or writing checks or whatever.
Well, they're doing one other thing along with that. They're trusting that the powers that be have this under control, because they've given an illusion, and it's per your failing report card. The governments of the world have decided, they had the original COP, and now we're going to have the 27th COP, Convergence of the Peoples, that are supposed to be on this global warming issue, climate change. And each of those 27 years, now they have set, or 26, this is the 27, they have set a goal. The bare minimum must be achieved to be on any kind of trajectory towards solving things. And they've fallen short every single time. They did not meet their minimum basic projection for what needed to be done. Not to mention that their projections were so far off for whatever reason. They're so far to not showing the whole picture. They have been underplaying the severity for 27 years now. So it's just a total failing grade all the way around. They either are hiding for some reason the severity, or they're just that incompetent or incapable of looking at the simple science that's presented to them. So it's a numbers game that we're playing now. All we need is enough people to get the facts and look at them. The more people that look at any problem, the more opportunity for solution, and not just solution, but innovative solutions. So it's a numbers game, and all we got to do is get more people looking at the project from different perspectives, and it's all can come together, and it can come together in a magnificent way. We just have to accept our responsibility and take our agency and use it. And those are the conversations. I sure hope we have a lot of people show up tomorrow to get this really rolling.
Beautiful. 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 Love it. So we're making a big push here in the town of Langley, where Melissa and I live. And we're one of the banners that we're putting it under is the other Langley, right? There's the famous Langley in Langley, Virginia, with the Central Intelligence Agency. We're creating essentially a decentralized intelligence agency, or a collective intelligence agency. The two are basically synonymous. So yeah, we'll be talking about what we're specifically doing in Langley as kind of a showcase example. Other showcase examples welcome and needed. Ultimately, we need 1 million towns and cities and communities around the world. Another banner under which we're doing this is called Sister Communities, within the context of Kindred Spirits. And we're going to have a big meeting next week on that. So there'll be more updates as we go, but we'll talk about both of these initiatives as ways to get this whole thing started at the block party. So that's what I wanted to share. And with that, I'm complete, and I pass the talking feather to you both, Marco and Alan. Anything you'd like to say? Take your time.
Really, the only thing I can think of right now is we didn't mention that the block party happens every Friday starting at 7 a.m. Pacific and goes for 24 hours.
Beautiful. Thank you, Marco. And if you want to be on the mailing list for the block party, just let us know. Drop a comment or whatever. If you're not on the mailing list already. All right. Well, look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. And thanks so much for watching. And thank you, Marco and Alan, for being a part of this. It's being actually not just a part of it, but major leaders in the block party and the conversation generally. And thank you again for watching and for being a part of it. We need everyone here. Like I said, all hands on deck, and let's make it happen. We can do it. All right. Much love, everyone.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow.
Indeed. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Good night.
Night night.